Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about mastering your Ascendance window. Specifically, we're talking about AoE, because single target is pretty self-explanatory, and if you're struggling with that, then we probably should have a different conversation first. Anyways, Ascendance is the entire spec. Everything we do between cooldowns exists to set up this Ascendance window, and yet it's still one of the most common places I see damage being left on the table. Not because players don't necessarily know what to press, but because the window moves so fast that it gets away from them before they even realize it. Because as soon as you click Ascendance, this entire spec shifts into Overdrive. Maelstrom floods in, you get Tempest procs firing off, Stormkeeper is already active, and the tier set haste buff is making everything fly out much faster than you would initially expect. So even if you are expecting it, a lot of players tend to get overwhelmed with this. There's a ceiling for every resource you have, and you've only got 15 seconds to extract as much damage out of those 15 seconds as possible. So let's actually break down what you should be doing and the why behind it so you truly understand how to get the most out of your Ascendance window. Before we get into the window itself, this part matters a lot because it sets everything else up. You want to click Ascendance at around 30 Maelstrom. The activation of the spell gives you a significant burst of Maelstrom the moment it fires off, so if you're sitting too high when you press the button, you're going to overcap immediately and just waste generation. Really, anything above 50 Maelstrom is risky territory. If you're creeping up the Maelstrom ladder, make sure to send a spender before you click it. Ideally, Elemental Blast, so you'll get the stat buff and you'll bring the Maelstrom back down to a clean level all at the same time. If you don't have the Maelstrom for Elemental Blast, Earthquake works fine too. The real point here is just to get your Maelstrom back down to a reasonable level. Going in at around 30 gives you room to absorb that activation burst and immediately start spending productively instead of just overcapping on the very first global. It sounds really simplistic, but this is probably the single most common setup mistake I've seen, where people just click Ascendance at 80 Maelstrom and then they're wondering why that window felt weird or clunky. Make sure to get your Maelstrom down first and everything else will flow from there. Okay, so you're at about 30 Maelstrom, you've precast Stormkeeper and it's ready to go, and then you click Ascendance. What now? The general sequence you're looking for after Ascendance activation is something like a Nature Swiftness Elemental Blast into Chain Lightning into Tempest. That's the very overly simplified and clean version of this intro window. The reason we do it in this specific order is for a couple of reasons. One, Elemental Blast gives you a random stat buff, either haste, crit, or mastery, every single time you cast it, and you want that buff running as early as possible inside that window so it's active while you're doing the bulk of your damage. More importantly, casting it during Ascendance almost guarantees you're overloading it, meaning you're getting all three buffs. By doing this first, the stats you get from it ride out the entirety of your burst window, making everything that follows just hit harder. Nature's Swiftness is kind of what makes this whole little intro burst super clean, because it turns that Elemental Blast, which is usually a 1.3-ish second cast time, into instantaneous casts. That's why the first thing you do in this Ascendance window is click that Elemental Blast, because that instant cast compounded with the overloads, the stat buffs you're getting, all combine to make this burst window much more powerful than it would have been had you not done it. Quick pause here, this is the part of the video where I'm supposed to be the responsible content creator and mention my Patreon. I offer elemental coaching over there where I can help you with Mythic Plus, rotations, raid, log reviews, and really anything you want. If you're interested, the link is in the description below, and if not, let's just get back to it. Now, if you recall, I mentioned you should be casting Chain Lightning prior to casting Tempest, but why is that? Mainly, it's because you're protecting your Stormkeeper charges from what's about to happen. When you cast Tempest, you get a guaranteed charge of Stormkeeper, but the thing is, spending Maelstrom on that Elemental Blast may have also generated a second Tempest proc. Now you're sitting on 2 Tempest charges, and each one of those is going to hand you another Stormkeeper stack when you cast them. If you're already sitting on multiple Stormkeeper charges going into that, you're going to hit the 4-charge cap and lose value. That's why sending Chain Lightning first is important, because it burns a charge and creates room for what might come. But it's important to mention that this only works cleanly if you click Ascendance at the right Maelstrom level. If you clicked it too high, the Ascendance activation burst already likely pushed you towards the cap of Maelstrom, and that Chain Lightning cast is just going to overcap your Maelstrom instead of helping you. And this is exactly the scenario where a lot of damage just kind of disappears without people truly understanding it. We're casting Chain Lightning ultimately for the damage, yes, that's correct, but we're also casting it for that Maelstrom generation, and being in Ascendance, it increases our Maelstrom generation tenfold, meaning that we're missing half of the reason we're casting that spell in the first place. That's why the 30 Maelstrom starting point for clicking Ascendance isn't really a suggestion or a tip, it's pretty much mandatory and what makes this entire sequence work. Okay, so that's the clean version of the window. You click Ascendance, Nature Swiftness Elemental Blast, send a Chain Lightning into a Tempest. Now let's talk about the not-so-clean version. You click Ascendance at 30 Maelstrom, and then you instant Ele Blast with that Nature Swiftness, and it's all good from there, But once it connects, a couple of things might happen that throw this entire sequence out of whack. First, you get a Tempest proc from that Elemental Blast spend, meaning you now have 2 Tempest charges stacked. Second, you might also get an Aftershock proc, which refunds the Maelstrom you just spent, putting you right back near the cap. Now you're sitting at 2 Tempest charges, near capped Maelstrom, and a pile of Stormkeeper charges that you haven't burned yet, all at the same time, out of just complete RNG, luck or unluck. The reason this scenario really hurts us is because all 3 of those resources have a cap, and they are all at risk simultaneously when this occurs. Pressing the wrong thing in the wrong order means you're overcapping on something regardless, and not all overcaps are created equal. So in this scenario, you need a clean priority to fall back on so you don't make the same mistake we were talking about earlier. There are 3 things that can overcap in this window, being Tempest charges, Maelstrom, and Stormkeeper charges. Priority number 1 in this entire thing is Tempest. It's the most important thing to not overcap, full stop. Do not pass go, do not click any Maelstrom spenders, just click Tempest. The reason is pretty straightforward. Tempest procs from spending Maelstrom. If you've already capped at 2 charges and you spend Maelstrom anyways, any proc that would have been fired from that spend is just gone into the wind. You're not generating a new charge, you're overwriting one that was waiting at the cost of Maelstrom, which means you're effectively losing, again, half of the reason you're sending that spell in the first place. If you only have 1 charge of Tempest, it's fine, move on to the next priority, but 2 Tempest charges means everything else waits for those Tempests to be cast. Your next job with priority number 2, once your Tempest charges are not capped, is to spend Maelstrom and keep it from hitting that ceiling. Overcapping on Maelstroms means you're missing spenders, and miss spenders means you're missing Tempest procs. Everything feeds back into Tempest, which is why Maelstrom is the second most urgent thing to manage. If Aftershock refunded your last spend and you're climbing back up fast, just send another one out immediately unless you get another Tempest proc, in which case your priority goes back to number 1, sending that Tempest. And finally, if your Tempest is under control and your Maelstrom isn't about to overcap, then you think about Stormkeeper charges. I don't want to say this, but it's an unfortunate truth that I have to at least mention that in these scenarios where you get a lot of RNG procs, it's sometimes not possible to prevent overcapping something. And in those scenarios, Stormkeeper is the one thing that you want to allow to overcap if everything goes wrong. Losing a Stormkeeper charge does hurt, but between the 3 resources we've been talking about in this window, Stormkeeper overcapping is the least catastrophic outcome of them all. So really, you use that Chain Lightning Stormkeeper charge when you have room, but never at the cost of the first 2 priorities. Well, let's pull this all back together because ideally that situation never happens. If you go into a pull with 30 Maelstrom, an instant Ele Blast Nature Swiftness, and then send a Chain Lightning before Tempest to protect your Stormkeeper charges, you're already setting yourself up for success to avoid most of that potential chaos we talked about. When things go sideways, and Aftershock will mean that at least occasionally sometimes things do go sideways, just follow the priority. 2 Tempest charges means you send Tempest. Priority 2, Maelstrom cap. If you have Maelstrom or you're close to capping, send it. And priority 3 at the end of that is Stormkeeper. If you overcap on Stormkeepers, it's bad, but it's not as bad as losing Maelstrom or Tempests. If you follow that order consistently, you'll be getting as much value out of every Ascendance window as possible, even the ones that do go sideways sometimes. But that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, I stream generally every Tuesday, Thursday over at Twitch at 8 p.m. Eastern, so if you want to see me do raid in real time or just hang out while we prog or do keys, that's the place to do it. And of course, make sure to check out the Discord if you want to be a part of the community, or the Patreon if you want to support the channel a little bit extra. But yeah, that's going to be it for today, so thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in the next one.